And here we go. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a two-time NCAA Division I wrestling champion. He's represented the United States at the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing. He's been an MMA champion in 2 organizations and competed in the UFC. Through it all, he's gained valuable insights on conquering the fear of failure, digging into your hidden willpower, and rising into your maximum level of performance. Welcome to the show, Ben Askren.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
What's up, man? It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Absolutely. One of my favorite topics in the world is sports psych, so it's going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, man. Well, you're telling me before we started the show that you just released a program. I'm a huge MMA fan. I've been doing martial arts my whole life, so I'm familiar with who you are and what you've accomplished, which I think is absolutely incredible. But for those who might be new to who you are and what you do, why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah, so I wrestled my whole life. I mean, I guess when I started, I played all the sports, little kid, just do a little bit of everything. As I grew up, I just kind of found myself wanting to wrestle more and more. I like the individuality, I like the self-reliance. I like that I determined my fate. And by the time I was about 14, I decided to do nothing but wrestle. So from that point, obviously started getting a lot better. Ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Missouri. I won a couple national titles there. I won the Hodge Trophy twice for the best college wrestler. I continued wrestling. I went to the Olympics in 2008, and then I made my transition to mixed martial arts. And I spent almost a decade there where I was undefeated for like 9 years, and then retired, unretired, came back, and then 2019 wasn't as successful at 1 and 2. And I retired again. And then I actually just recently on September 1st had is it called a hip resurfacing, Birmingham hip procedure, because I had some hip issues from all the athletics. So yeah, doing a lot of the things in my life. I have some wrestling academies, also some podcasts. So I stay pretty busy.
Yeah, man. You're even telling me, you have a podcast and you're in the crypto space and you're doing all kinds of stuff. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So, obviously wrestling was my first podcast. I think you said you started your podcast way back when, just because you were interested in it. And it was kind of the same for me. It was, I was on the phone with he was an acquaintance at the time and has become a friend, both high-level wrestlers. And, I think he said, I want to start a podcast. And, well, you know what? I want to start a podcast. It's like, hey, how about we just call each other once a week and just do a podcast? Okay, let's do that, So then him and I did it for about 100 episodes or so. And then he got too busy with his job where he just wasn't able to commit. So I ended up finding another one and did that one for a while, about 120 episodes. And then I moved on to Flow Wrestling Radio Live. So I'm there Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays with them. I got my crypto show on Mondays with my buddy named John Kim. And then I do an MMA podcast once in a while on a platform called Rockfin, roughly once a week. But the cards are boring. We just say, we don't really want to cover it.
Holy crap, man. Well, I used to think that I did a lot of content, but hearing that, it's pretty impressive. One of the things that you've done is you've made it to the Olympics in wrestling. And if you've competed in wrestling before, you know how gruesome it is. And I think that's one of the things it teaches you is work ethic. So why don't we just kind of start with that, man? What has martial arts taught you in life, and how do you think that can transition into the everyday person, especially, with your course out there, Overcoming the Fear of Failure? It's something that I get asked a lot, and a lot of people who have so much ability, they don't even take the first step because they're so afraid of what other people might think. They're afraid of failure, whatever the case may be. But I think that you have some great insights on all of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, so with that specific topic, and I think we could go a few different directions, but with that really specific one, I think about this. I wrestled my whole life, and I won NCAA titles, made it to the Olympics. I didn't get to the pinnacle, which would be an Olympic gold medalist. I fought for a decade. I won a Bellator world title. I won a one championship world title. I made it to the UFC. I was, essentially in a title eliminator where if I won, I would go for the world title. And, I came up a little bit short. And so in both those ventures, I came up a little short. And yet you still see I made it really far, but people will call you a failure. So it's like whenever someone's going to start something, there's no way you're going to make it to the top without having some failure there. And even if you do make it really far, people will still try to find something to pick at you for. So the notion that you might fail at something is going to keep you from starting something is just, in my mind, I know it does prevent people from doing so. In my mind, it's totally insane because no matter how far you get, people are going to call you a failure. And so it's like, well, just whatever, just freaking go for it. And then, whatever happens, happens. And, if you take it all the way to the Olympics, take it to the Olympics. If maybe you just do it for a little while and you decide you don't like it, then, at least you went and tried it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And well, if you know your personality at all, I've seen some of your interviews, and I think I became aware of who you were because you were calling out GSP or something. And I was a GSP fan. I was like, what the heck is this guy talking crap about GSP? He's the Canadian favorite. So that's how you came on the radar. But as I kind of watched how you would do interviews and how humble you were, like in winning and defeat, and how you kind of promo the show a little bit, you have like thick skin, and I loved how you would just give Dana White a hard time. I thought that was hilarious. And what would you recommend for people who are just struggling with what other people think? It's such a common thing. Like even now for me, I think that I struggle with that because some of the avenues I talk about on the podcast are not what you'd say politically correct. I find some information that's really frigged up, and I just try to share that. But some people just throw so much hate at you, and you're like, wow, that's hard to handle. But do you have any suggestions for things like that?
Yeah, well, especially in today's age, if you're choosing something political, it's going to be very divisive. Well, you know what? I think so. I don't know how old you are, but when I was in high school, my sophomore year, it was like the advent of forums, right? I mean, there was no social media. Do you remember forums?
I remember forums. Yeah, I'm 36.
Okay, I'm 36. So we're roughly
cool, right on.
So it was like I was a sophomore in high school, and there was these things called forums that were happening. So a long time ago, if our listeners are younger, when the internet was getting started, you would go to, there was no social media, so you would go to a forum for whatever you were interested in, right? So like there might be a national wrestling forum, and in this case there was a Wisconsin wrestling forum. Well, I go on there, and so I was at a tournament, and someone says, hey, everyone's talking about you on this forum, and I was starting to get good within the state of Wisconsin, and I go on there and everyone's saying how these two guys are going to kick my ass the next week at the tournament. And I'm a kid, I'm 15, and I'm like, whatever, that's bullcrap. And, so I get in there, start typing, this is bullshit, I'm gonna kill those guys, whatever. And the amount of blowback I got from it was like, holy moly, people are like really legit mad that I went and said something. But in my mind, it was like, well, they're adults and they started it. I'm 15, whatever, So then literally my last 2 years of high school was like, I would just try to antagonize these people to see what kind of rise I could get out of them. And so I got to realize from a really young age that human nature is kind of cruel. People like picking on people that are out there. And they even, in this case, if that's a bunch of adults picking on a 15 and 16-year-old kid, that was the case. And so I think I learned from a really young age that it's like, whatever. People can say whatever they want. I have my core group of people, and obviously my core group has kind of probably changed and grown and evolved. Like I have my wife now. She wasn't with me when I was 16. And that I trust their opinion. If I need feedback, I'll go to them. I do not go to my Twitter comments or my Instagram comments for feedback. That is that's about the worst place you can go for feedback, because you're gonna get some shit ideas.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that I like that you do, I assume that the Askren Academy, you're coaching some high school wrestlers and some younger wrestlers. Yeah. So, doing the work like that, I volunteered teaching boxing for a while and been involved in martial arts quite a bit. I think that the value through martial arts for a kid is incredible. They can take all those skills to anywhere in their life. And, I switched up my background today for this one because it's usually something else. But I think for me, I resonate a little bit with what Bruce Lee said. He's like, martial arts taught me everything about life, how I did anything. And so when you're teaching the kids or young people, what do you teach them about resilience, perseverance, and just overcoming adversity? Because to become a champion or a high level performer at anything, like to compete at the highest level, you need so many different things. And one of them is perseverance and work ethic and drive and mental toughness. And so when you're teaching them, like, do you have tools in mind, or you just kind of get questions from the kids and answer as they come along?
Yeah, I'll talk the mental stuff with them. I try to do a mental Monday every single week with them. But, a lot of it I think actually comes best when in tournaments, right? When there's wins and losses. Kids are usually most open to hearing advice when there's something painful or emotional that just happened. When everything's going great, they don't want to hear it. Everything's great. And so you got to kind of wait for the opportune times to say, hey, Johnny, you're just a little too stubborn. Listen, you lost that match. I tried to do this last week, and you just won't listen. You don't want to change this. So this is why. Or, hey, Billy, I've been trying to get you tougher, and you lost the match because you lacked the toughness to fight through that one situation. And so for me, I guess sports psych goes way far back. I tried writing a sports psychology book on wrestling in 2006-07 with the PhD that I was working with. It wasn't very good, so we never published it. But I've been kind of, I don't know, kind of obsessed. And what I've kind of realized since then is that I think the sports psych of wrestling. First, I said, okay, well, this is really similar to sports psych of combat sports, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts. And then, I started to do business. I thought, well, this is really similar to the psychology of business too. I mean, right? And so what I started realizing is a lot of these things have so many similarities. Psychology is psychology, and there might be slightly different applications. Whether you're in wrestling or business or relationship, there might be different applications, but the psychology is like psychology. Work ethic is going to help you in pretty much everything. Empathy is going to help you in pretty much everything, right? So when you have these skills, you can kind of cross them across the board. I think wrestling, kind of like you said, wrestling, martial arts, I think individual sports kind of excessively help this category because there's no one to blame it on, right? And that was kind of what I loved about wrestling. It's just you. Like if you lose, it's your fault. That's it. There's no, that guy didn't throw me the ball, or that guy didn't. You're in Canada, right? That guy didn't hit me the puck. There's none of that. It's like it's me and it's him. We're gonna shake hands and we'll figure out who the best guy is. And when I lose, if I lose, I'm gonna say, okay, what did I do wrong and how can I get better? That's that's kind of what drew me to wrestling. And so yeah, obviously we try to pass those lessons to all the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And for, my background mostly would be in extreme sports. And so if you're trying to learn a new trick or progress a little bit further, there's always a danger zone. Yes. And so even though you might have landed your first backflip and it'd be terrifying, or I can't imagine what it would be like.
What sport specifically?
Skateboarding and snowboarding. I got the best at snowboarding. But when I was younger, I was good at skateboarding. So, nice. And even some of my athletes are, motocross riders. So that's the pinnacle of danger, flying 100 feet in the air.
Is that the worst? Or I would think kind of, we talked about the rise of Superman, which I loved.
Oh, yeah.
I would think for me, the two things. The one would be the surfing on the big waves. Holy shit, I would be so scared. Yeah. And then number two would be the little wingsuits they do off the mountain. Like those people, they got issues.
Yeah, the wingsuit, especially they do proximity flying to make it worse. They don't need to do that, but they do it, and it ends up being way more dangerous. There's actually this skier named Shane McConkey, who's now, rest in peace. But that guy was like the founder of that. He would take his skis and then he would go base jumping off the edge of these crazy cliffs and just do triple backflips, chuck off his skis, then wingsuit. Like the guy was gnarly. That's an amazing document. Actually, in The Rise of Superman, he talks about him. He's incredibly gnarly.
The McConkey guy?
Yeah, Shane McConkey. Yeah, one of the gnarliest people ever. And so, if he's going to go do something like that, or some people could argue stepping into a cage where somebody wants to literally hit you as hard as they can.
That seems simple to me.
So, what was the preparation or walkout for you? Did you have nerves, or like did you psych yourself up in any way, or what was that like for you?
So actually not really. Kind of the opposite, actually. And this goes all the way back to my freshman year of high school. I was starting to get better at wrestling. I was starting to improve, and I went to this the biggest national tournament they have in the United States for that specific age group. And I crapped the bed. I did really terrible. I just didn't perform up to my par, and it was like, why? And this coach sat me down, and part of my thing was I was obsessing about all these things that didn't matter, right? I was obsessing about the college coaches who might be watching me, or who I might face in a couple more rounds, or all this other stuff. And so, I was able to learn a very valuable lesson very early on, is that the only thing that you really need to think about are the things that actually matter. And, and very, very literally. So, if you're skateboarding, like, well, how am I going to hit this next trick? That's the only thing that matters. It's not like who's watching me, what happens if I do land this trick, will the score be enough? Like all that thing is really just going to be a distraction from your performance. And so when I learned that as a 14-year-old, or maybe I was 15, somewhere around there, I was able to kind of really start applying it through my wrestling. I got really good at it to the point where, I was able to just find maximum relaxation before I performed. And that was how I performed the best. And obviously once you finally step in the cage or you shake hands on the rest of the match, yeah, it's time to click in and focus. Okay, what do I need to do? I need to get my hands on him. Okay, I need to take him down. Okay, I need to punch him in his face, right? Or whatever.
The basics.
The very specific actions. But it's like, oh, the crowd's cheering. Well, that's not important. That's a distraction. Oh, people are watching on TV. Not important. That's a distraction. Oh, if I win, I'm going to get this. Not important. It's a distraction. And so I was able to, learn that at a young age. And it was something I think I really put into practice as I was, getting older and progressing in the sport. And then obviously as I course through mixed martial arts, something I really, really focused on and it helped me a lot.
Okay. Well, I hear you. So I agree with that philosophically, but how would you assist somebody if they were walking out to the cage and they were polar opposite? Like they got stuck in anxiety, or like a high school kid, right?
Yeah.
He's worried about losing and then he, loses a girlfriend, or like a lot of people, if they're
loses his girlfriend, that doesn't flip matter. Forget about
it. So, or like a small business or something like that. So many people just won't start because they imagine that end result. So how do you kind of get them to just, get out of that fear and anxiety of what could be and just actually take that step towards what they want?
It's just so like this is like anything. It takes practice, and this is actually one of the main reasons I say mixed martial artists, wrestlers have the biggest advantage because we compete so frequently. I mean, right by the time I'm done wrestling, I've probably wrestled 1,500 matches, 2,000 matches, and so literally like that. Not only the skill of wrestling, but the skill of competition. How do I compete well? How do I get my mind ready to optimize my performance? And I get to practice that over and over and over. So, if someone's walking in the cage and they're having that anxiety, man, they probably should have practiced that before, right? They should have practiced that before. I don't want to say it's too late, but we're going to have a hard time at that point. And so just like anything, you need to practice. And so, when you see a flaw, like for me, right, that happened when I was 14, hey, at this tournament, I had two really terrible performances. Well, why did this happen? And luckily I had a coach who was able to identify why that happened. And he was able to also not only identify it, but give me, something that he thought would be a good solution. So it just so happened it worked. And so then, I'm essentially not competing at the pinnacle of the sport for another, right, 7 years. I'm still a freshman in high school. So it's like, I don't compete in an NCAA final for, I guess, another 6 years till I'm in an NCAA final, where I'm at the pinnacle of the sport of folk style wrestling. And so I get to practice this. All these matches, I'm just practicing my mindset. And, I always tell people to kind of do a best and worst. So, right, you can you haven't skateboarded or snowboarded well. You probably think the best performance you ever had, right? You probably think that. And then you can think, well, what was the worst performance you ever had? And you probably think of that. It's like, okay. And so ideally, you're identifying those closer. And what did I do? How did I warm up? What was I thinking? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When I had my best one, and what was I doing when I had my worst one? Oh, when I had my worst one, I was thinking about when my girlfriend broke up with me, and I was obsessed with that. I didn't think about what else I was doing. That was why I messed up. Okay, good. We need to get rid of that, right? And so start focusing on the things that you're doing when you're performing the best.
Simple. I love it. One of the strategies that I would tell the snowboarders is call it like a mental trick bag. So you try to learn a 360 or something, and you try over and over and over and over again, and then eventually you get it. And it's awkward, but you get it. And I say, remember that and remember the feeling of it. Then go back up. And every time you do it, just take a moment to breathe it in, to feel what it feels like. So now you're logging it in. And so a backflip's a bit of a better example, because as you progress to the next level, and there's always a next level, and it's going to be harder. If you're in business, you're going to get to a next level of responsibilities and scaling your business. If it's in sport, you're going to get a next level of competition where you need to be sharper and practice your skills. And so with the backflip example, if I've remembered all those times where I was successful and I scaled up, and now I'm looking at a jump that's 70 feet and I'm going to be going real fast at it, or in your case, one of the best wrestlers or the best MMA athletes in the world, you can remember all those times you were successful, what you did, and prime yourself for performing your absolute best, because that's all you can control. And I guess I wonder if you could talk about that. And it's like, going into a competition or an endeavor and knowing what you can control and kind of surrendering what you can't.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I mean, I think that's what we were just discussing, is that, there's a lot of things you can't control and that you can't think about, like, what's going to happen with this certain outcome, or, will my dad yell at me if I lose, or will my girlfriend dump me if I don't perform well here? Again, you can't control those things. You can't control those things, and they don't matter in the moment. And so the best people, the people who compete the best, are able to really stay in the moment. And that's actually kind of, we go back to the rise of Superman. That was one of the things I kind of loved about, not that I really ever want to do any extreme sports, and maybe you consider mixed martial arts extreme sport, but it's like the finding the zone, right? It's kind of like almost like a drug, like an addictive drug. And like for me, I'll tell you, I love to compete. And it's like I don't really ever foresee myself fighting another fight. But if I could say every single day, I could just wake up and I could walk out in front of 20,000 people like I was getting ready to perform, it's like, and get in that zone of, okay, now it's time to compete. Like, that's freaking awesome. And I love it. And so, but obviously in extreme sports, like you said, once you get good at it, it's too easy, and they need to keep taking the next step up and the next step up and the next step up. And then it becomes more and more and more dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And, that's one of the things it's a bit of a sidetrack, but what I love about, martial arts is the competition. I was always about like, just what was I capable of? What were humans capable of? And when I did my travel, I went to Phuket Top Team and trained MMA because I wanted to be a better fighter. But then I went to China and I trained with Shaolin monks because I wanted to know the limits of human potential. And some of these monks could break stone with 2 fingers.
Come on, for real? Are you sure it wasn't fake?
That's what I checked. I interviewed the guy. I interviewed him. I checked it out. You know what I mean? And I looked at their
Did you try to hit the stone first or something?
Yes, right? Because you can trick, right? You can make it a trick. And I interviewed him and I asked him, what is the trick? And I asked him 3 times, and there was a translator there because he couldn't speak English. And he said years. And he started slamming his fingers down on the table. And outside the academy, there were dent holes from them poking the tree doing hard Qigong. So there is a possibility that
why do they poke stuff?
For hard Qigong to condition their body, just like Muay Thai, kicking hard stuff. So so there's dent holes in the trees, and I watched their training, and it was so intense. And I asked him, I said, is this possible for anyone? He goes, yeah, but most people are going to give up just before they get there. So they would spend years doing hard Qigong, and also years doing, meditation and inner work. And it's because you're a martial artist, you're aware of this. There's some tomfoolery out there, right? Some magic.
Of course. Yes.
People will say, hey, I can do this. But you're like, no, let me see that. Let me grab the one you're going to break first and hit it. But I think from what I could see, they were legit. And so, one of the things I love about martial arts was testing myself with someone else, and it always makes me better. So if I were in your neighborhood, I'd be like, I want to wrestle Ben because he's going to kick my ass, but it'll make me better. And I can do whatever I want, and it's not going to work. But the how fast I'll get better is astronomical versus me just beating up somebody who can't do it. So I want to ask you a little bit about the course you just released, because I think the outline is great. But also, as a side note, from a competition perspective, is there anybody that you would have loved to fight, or for like a dream list, dead or alive, that you would love to just test yourself in competition?
I think the three are obvious: Matt Hughes, George St. Pierre, and Khabib. I mean, so Matt Hughes, and Matt Hughes and George were the welterweight champions. Essentially, I feel like I kind of hit my pinnacle, or not my pinnacle. I started really hitting my stride in like 2012 in fighting. I started in 2009, and I won the Bellator belt in 2010. But I think 2012 was when I really started like getting good at fighting. It takes a while. And then, so from that time period, Matt Hughes, and then George, and then so the other guy who was the champion for a while was Robbie, who I fought, and Tyron Woodley, who was a good buddy of mine. So I don't want to fight him. So those other 3 are the ones I would really like to challenge. And obviously I didn't get my opportunity until a little bit later in life. When I unretired at the end of 2018 and then fought in 2019. But those are the guys I kind of always looked at and said I would love to have my opportunity with them. And well, unfortunately, I never did get that. Yeah,
man. Well, I would love to see those fights, because when I started to pay attention to you more and like how you'd won your previous fights, there was this, like, I don't know how to describe it, but there's like this grittiness, this determination that's so hard to handle, and they call it like even in Muay Thai, when you're out there, they're like, you'll have to kill me to get me out of the ring because of their preparation. You know, they call it the spirit of martial arts. The way
Yeah.
that they'll train is so intense. Like I remember one of the champions kicking me and it felt like a baseball bat, but how intensely they train. They're like, they're not going to go out easily, you know? And I kind of saw that, you know, maybe it was from wrestling or whatever, but you know, you had like a very strong will. It was an interesting thing to watch because you would see some fighters and, you know, there's a point that they're going to wilt.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so if you can
Mhm.
get to the point where, you know, those fighters aren't going to wilt, it makes it interesting because how far do they go, you know? And you're definitely one of those.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of what I don't want to say is bred into us because that's not the right word, but that's what's taught to us as wrestlers. I mean, the practice room battles are always worse than the matches. I mean, I spent years and years and years, you know, scrapping with the best guys in the country. And so, yeah, I mean, that was kind of in wrestling. Actually, I was able to use that really for a huge advantage to kind of will people as the match went on. In MMA, it's a little bit tougher. I don't want to get too technical because I don't, you know, this is an MMA specific podcast, but there are some technical reasons why I don't think it's quite as easy. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that kind of like a dog on a bone.
Yeah, man. Well, let's get in a little bit about your Askren Mindset that you just
Yeah.
produced and made. You kind of have six key sections that you go through. Do you want to just share those a little bit and like what the overview is and what you're trying to educate people on?
Yeah. So you know what I said, I was very into sports psych. I kind of tried to write a book. That was 2006 and 7. That was my senior of college. And it wasn't good enough. So we never published it, right? Because it wasn't good enough. And I always thought, okay, when I get older and I have a little more time, then I'm going to do a book. And you know, it just so happens I kind of suck at writing. I'm not very good at it. And so, you know, someone kind of so when coronavirus started, someone said, well, you should do a course, right? And I'm like, okay, well, you know, I do all these podcasts, so getting behind a microphone, well, that's not right. I could do that. That's not such a big deal. Like, that's for me, that's way easier than writing. So it's like, okay, cool. Well, what do I do a course on? Because when you think about mindset, there's like a billion components that make someone really tick. I mean, when you want to really get into it, it's just, you could go so deep. And so we kind of, you know, shuffled through a whole bunch of topics. This was one that came up, and it's something I think I'm particularly adept at. You know, I had obviously the big embarrassing loss in front of everybody in 2019 in MMA, but you know, one of the things that I think I dealt with stuff so well is because I was never that good at wrestling when I was younger. I wanted to be good, and I eventually got good, but I wasn't very good. So I had to spend a lot of time dealing with failure and adversity. And so, you know, when we kind of came upon the idea of doing this course, I loved it because it was just something I feel very comfortable talking about. Because, like you said, you know, I've had a lot of success, although I've not reached the pinnacle in either sport. I came relatively close, and yet people still try calling me a failure. And so I feel like I'm kind of able to relate really well. So we broke it down, made the outline. Man, it was a lot more work than I kind of envisioned it would be in the first place. But then when I got it done, I was like, wow, that was really good. I really like what I did. You know, I think it can be very valuable to a lot of people.
Awesome, man. Well, there's some great things in here. We've talked a little bit about fear of failure.
Yeah.
But what about the Stockdale Paradox? Never heard about that before. Is that your
You
own name?
never.
Or
Oh,
is
that's
that actually
so
a thing?
important. Oh, it's okay. So I stole it. Didn't make it up. It's named after, I don't remember if he's a lieutenant or general. It's a military officer. And it was from the book Good to Great. I don't know if you've read that book.
Yeah.
Okay, really good business book. And so the Stockdale Paradox, you know, essentially says you can do two things at once. You can acknowledge where you're at without ever giving hope of where you're going to go. And I think this is important because a lot of people struggle with this concept because they lean one of two ways, right? They want to be this overall optimist that I can get there. But generally when people do that, they struggle with acknowledging where they're at right now. And then on the other side, a lot of people who are willing to acknowledge where they're at right now, sometimes they're more pessimistic, right? And they still don't see the long view. So being able to hold both these things true at the same time, I think is so vital. And you know, I said in my life, you know, I dedicated my life to wrestling when I was 14. And it's like, dude, I wasn't very good. But it was like, so in the year 2000, I said I want to be an Olympian in 2008. And it's like, okay, if we actually just ranked, this doesn't happen, right? But you rank everyone who's going to be eligible in 2008 to make the Olympic team. I'm like number 1,000, right? I'm nowhere close. I'm so far down this list of, people who could potentially make this team. And so
I would have whooped you in high school and then just kill me as an adult. That would have been when I peaked.
Yeah. So it's like, you got to acknowledge where you're at and acknowledge your weaknesses, and just never give up faith that if you keep putting in the time that you can make it to where you want to go. And so now I would even go further with that. It's like in 2007, I had, a lot of college wrestling success, but then when I went to the international competition, so only the number one person in the country makes it to the Olympics. And so 2007 is the World Championships. So, the number one guy goes to the World Championships. And essentially it's the same process every year. Just in the off years, it's called the World Championships, and the on years, it's called the Olympics. And I was 5th and 6th in America. And I know that doesn't seem like very far from first, but in that level of competition, it's kind of really far away. So again, I had to check myself and say, okay, well, I've had a lot of success in college wrestling. What am I struggling with right now? What am I failing at? What do I need to get better at? And I was able to say, okay, I am struggling here. I can fix these things. I can turn around. I can make the Olympic team by next year. It's less than 12 months from the day I lost at the World Team Trials to then making the Olympic team. Less than 12 months, I can make those changes.
Holy crap, man. Well, that's a really inspiring story, because I think that when you look at successful athletes, many had a very similar path of failure and having to maybe quote unquote grind it out. Like they'll say, most coaches will take hard work over talent any day. And so maybe you can kind of, you were talking about a little bit, but distinguish between, in your course, you're talking about digging in when failure strikes, when to dig in, when to innovate, and when to pivot. And it's such an important thing, because to be successful, you're going to need to dig in a lot. You're going to need to persevere. And so at one point, is it like giving in too early, right? Because at some point you could have said, you know what, not going to make it, right? And do you want it bad enough, or do you pivot and use all those skills into something else? And does passion or purpose play into that at any point? Mm-hmm. Like for me, I think a big distinction is you got to really want it, to work that hard. You really have to want to be able to put in the work to, get to that end result, or to just to see what you're capable of. I think about the Socrates quote that he just says, it's a shame for a man not to see what his body's capable of, or something. You know what I mean? To be how strong you can be. Socrates was a beast, apparently. So it's just like, that for me is like checking out the human potential. And I think that Bruce Lee said the same thing. And that's a lot of what martial arts is about, or even success in business when it's done right for the right reasons.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember why I said something earlier. I said I was on a call the other day. I couldn't remember what the call was, and I just recalled. And actually, we talked about this too. It's funny because they didn't know about my course, but they kind of brought it up just out of nowhere. And it was they said, well, in business, what we see, because so I've owned a small business now for 8 years, so we're doing relatively well. And they wanted me to talk to other like new entrepreneurs. And they said, what we see a lot of times is everyone just wants to pivot. It's like the cool thing. Let's just pivot. And they were complaining about it. And I'm like, yeah, you freaking nailed it. You can't pivot early on, right? You got to put that time. You got to put in the work to get anywhere. If you just keep pivoting, you're going to be stuck just going in a circle, because you just keep pivoting the next thing before you get anywhere. And so, I think obviously it's something that has to be done at some times. But, when you're early in your career or early in a new venture, it's going to be a lot of digging in. It's going to be a lot of hard work. It's going to be a lot of grinding it out. And then, the innovate can be something wholly new. Like I kind of innovated the style of wrestling with the scrambling I did. But it can be something simple, too. It can be something to you. Like one of my buddies who owns a spring roll company. And he did a lot of live events, and he had a restaurant, and then obviously Corona hit, and most of that stuff is done. And so it's like, okay, he could pivot and just do something different in his life, but instead he innovated. And so what he did was he was able to create a kind of a frozen line and was able to sell those, and his sales was actually better than it was last year. And so it's like, that was just a small innovation. It's not like he made a new product. It's not like he created a new business. It was just like, he said, okay, what's my hardship? My hardship was this Corona shit going on. And I can't do all these live events that I usually do in all these markets. So how do I fix this? How do I still sell this product that's really good? And he was able to come up with a new solution. So, Yeah, I think that, when you're talking about failure and adversity, it's a lot of digging in. It's a lot of, innovations, and they can be really small. And then the pivot needs to happen once in a while. But yeah, these women who read this group the other day they were going off because they were like, yeah, it's a new cool thing. Everyone just wants to pivot constantly, and they never get anywhere.
Yeah, I think the circle thing's a great analogy because you only go a little way and you make a turn. So if you
Uh-huh.
keep doing that, it's definitely a perfect spiral. And I think that analogy is good too because if you take your example, digging into wrestling, getting to top level competition, NCAA or even Olympics, then you could transition to MMA, you know what I mean? Give MMA a real run, get to a high level and take like that success or that learning
Yeah.
from getting good at something. And it really doesn't matter what it is. If you enjoy it and you're willing to work at it, it can be anything. Get really good at it. Learn how to master something, because if you learn how to master that skill, you're going to acquire so much knowledge and information that you can transition into something, and you've gotten to a level where you earned it, or you have some momentum, or you have something to pivot with. If
Yeah.
you don't get to that high level, you're really going to not have anything to work with. You're just going to kind of start at ground zero again.
Well, I think it's actually really prevalent in fighting is when guys don't pivot. And fighting is one of the sports where if you stick around too long, it gets ugly. I mean, if you pay attention to mixed martial arts, you can tell those guys right, the worst one would be BJ Penn. I think in his last 9 fights, he was 1-8. And it was just like, dude, like, why can't you go do something else? Like, this isn't for you anymore. This is a young man's game. You're not very good anymore. You're just getting your ass kicked. Like, we don't want to, we don't want to see this anymore. I think Dana White had to come to the point where it's like, I'm not going to give you any more fights. Like, no one wants to see you in there anymore. It's ugly. And so, as fighters age, or as athletes age, it's you need to be able to pivot into something else. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck just fighting forever. And then, then you get to the end of the road, and Dana White literally won't give you another fight because it's bad. And then what are you going to do? Right? Then you have nothing built for yourself. So, for me, like, I was able to pivot into doing business and podcasting and other stuff. And it's something a bunch of stuff that I really enjoy. And so, yeah, like, again, you don't want to pivot a lot, but it is important to be able to do that once in a while.
Well, that kind of brings up a different question I was going to ask that I was going to ask you originally. In sports, it's a common thing. It's a lot of times when athletes are done, they don't know what to do. They were kind of in one direction, and this is really prevalent in NFL football. I was coaching a pro football player once, and I asked him how accurate is Ballers. The show Ballers? Yeah, I love that show. I was like, how accurate is Ballers? Like, it's quite accurate, actually. I was like, okay, cool. And so, if they don't perform, they can get in all this crazy stuff. And so they kind of need, like, if you're done sport, they don't know what to do. So I guess what I wanted to ask originally, what is your top tip on just mental toughness for life and how to persevere? But the second kind of question to that is, for those athletes out there that, dedicated their whole life to this one thing, and now they don't know what to do. What do you say to those types of people?
Yeah, I would say that it is going to come to an end, right? I love reading athlete biographies as I was growing up, and I think that's one of the things I realized, that almost every athlete, there's been so few of them that were actually retired on time. Like, the numbers really, really small in any sport. And it's hard right now. I'm older, and it's like, well, I enjoyed what I did. I don't really want to retire, but for me, it was the hip surgery. It was like, okay, you're done. Like, I have to get this done. I think I probably would have retired either way, most likely, because again, I've read all these books, these athletes, and it's like, at some time your body only has a finite time. Nobody's undefeated against time. It's impossible, right? And a Father Time always wins. And so what are you going to do after sports? And that's important because most guys are done. I mean, most people are done with sports by the time they're 18. There's a few that last till they're 22 when they're out of college. And there's a really tiny amount that lasts beyond that. But if you make it to 30 playing pro sports, you are an anomaly, total anomaly. So, it's like you need to come to this realization that you need to find something else to do. And a lot of the traits that served you well in athletics, if you use them properly, will also serve you well in business and whatever you want to do in the rest of your life.
Awesome, man. Love it. Well, dude, this has been a pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting. Is there anything else that you want to chat about, or you wish that I'd asked before we close the show?
No, you know what? You asked some really awesome questions. It was kind of like, I feel like the whole talk was about sports psych, which I think is probably my favorite topic to talk about. So I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and we obviously talked about my course. It's on benaskren.com. You just go to Askren Mindset when you click on there. It's hopefully the first of many. I really enjoyed putting it out there. I think I have some hopefully good wisdom to kind of pass forward to the generations. And that's kind of it. Yeah, I had a blast.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, like I did the Zen Athlete book years ago, and when I first released it, and I still say it now, all the sports psychology techniques apply anywhere. You can apply it
Yes.
to music, you can apply it to art, you can apply it to business. And a lot of the time too, and in those categories, they don't deal with the adversity or challenges that an athlete does. And so if you get those tools and capabilities and you have them and you bring them over there, you're going to perform at a higher level. And so I'm always advocating for any kind of mental training, any kind of mental toughness. So
Yes.
to go to benaskren.com. That's where they should go to find all this stuff.
And obviously I don't love Instagram. I'm on there. I'm really active on Twitter. I enjoy Twitter. I enjoy the back and forth of it. And so I'm quite active on Twitter. So you can follow, it's just at Askren on there.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned at the beginning, you're doing crypto stuff too, which I find fascinating.
Well,
I was out of it, then I'm into it. So now I'm curious again. So I'll check it out too.
Yeah, absolutely. Get back into crypto. We do a show every Monday. It goes live on it goes live a few places, Facebook, on my Twitter. Love crypto. I really do think it's the future. That's from the bottom of my heart. So start doing your own research, everybody, and find the future.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate you, man. And we'll stay in touch.
All right. Have a great day. Peace.
Okay. Peace, guys.